Hi students, and now we have a video on the later Victorian period, the period that goes from 1870 to 1901. In this period, the costs of empire became increasingly apparent, and England was confronted with growing threats to its military and economic preeminence. Home rule for Ireland became an increasingly controversial topic of debate. In 1867, a second reform bill passed, extending voting rights even further to some working class citizens. A variety of socialist movements gained force, some influenced by the revolutionary theories of Marx and Engels. As a result of early campaigns by people such as Michael Sadler and the Earl of Shaftesbury, and reports by parliamentary commissions, legislation protecting child and adult workers began to be enacted. Important reforms, including legislation on child labour, safety in mines and factories, public health and education, were taken too. In fact, as for education, by 1876, education became compulsory for all children up to the age of 10. There was also prison reform and the establishment of the police. As far as it concerns literature, the literature of the 1890s is characterized by self-conscious melancholy and aestheticism, but also saw the beginnings of the modernist movement. The extreme inequities between men and women stimulated a debate about women's roles known as the women question. Women were denied the right to vote or hold political office throughout the period, but gradually won significant rights such as custody of minor children and the ownership of property in marriage. By the end of Victoria's reign, women could take degrees at 12 universities. Hundreds of thousands of working-class women labored at factory jobs under appalling conditions, and many were driven into prostitution. While John Stuart Mill argued that the nature of women was an artificial thing, most male authors prefer to claim that women had a special nature fitting them for domestic duties. In 1848, the first women's college was established. Women were otherwise excluded from England's 3 universities. It should be remembered that while the woman question often sought, at least in principle, rights for all women, it was primarily addressed to women of the middle class. In other words, while women argued for access to employment and bemoaned the stereotypical fate of the middle-class wife, who had to while away her time at home with insignificant trivial pursuits, hundreds of thousands of lower-class women worked in grueling industrial conditions in mines and mills. Related to the larger woman question, the problem of prostitution gained increasingly, and prostitution itself grew, in part to fill demand, of course, but also because it was actually a better choice for many women relative to the working conditions they would face in the factories. Literacy increased significantly in the period, and publishers could bring out more material more cheaply than ever before. Because of advances in printing technologies, publishers could provide more texts of various kinds to more people. The most significant development in publishing was the growth of the periodicals. Novels and long works of non-fiction were published in serial forms, fostering a distinctive sense of a community of readers. The Victorian period saw enormous growth in periodicals of all kinds. Many famous novelists, like Charles Dickens, for example, published their work not in book form at first, but in several installments in magazines. The practical reality of publishing in serial form had a direct impact on style, including how plots were paced, organized, and developed. Victorian novels seek to represent a large and comprehensive social world, constructing a tension between social conditions and the aspirations of the hero or heroine. Writing in the shadow of Romanticism, the Victorians developed a poetry of mood and character. While prose fiction was the most widely circulated kind of writing, in the Victorian period, poetry retained its iconic status of high literature. While most readers continued to expect poetry to teach a moral lesson, Victorian poetry tends to be pictorial and often uses sound to convey meaning. Poets of the period ranged widely in their subject matter. Some sought to revive mythic themes, Arthurian legend, for example, while others turned a critical eye on the industrial abuses of the present, such as the problem of child labor. As for the theatre, a flourishing and popular institution throughout the period, was transformed in the 1890s by the comic masterpieces of George Bernard Shaw and Oscar Wilde. Very different from each other, both took aim at Victorian pretense and hypocrisy. The Victorian theatre was a popular institution, especially for those with the means to enjoy it as one of life's many pleasures. In addition to traditional plays, the theatre also included all manner of spectacle, from burlesque to musicals to pantomime.